Have you ever woken up with the eerie sense that the life you're living doesn't fully belong to you? That somewhere along the way, the choices you made, the beliefs you defend, even the dreams you chase, might not have come from deep within you at all, but instead from the people around you, from society, from fear. We grow up thinking we're shaping ourselves. But what if most of us are actually shaped by everything we've learned to obey, to avoid, and to silence? This video is about that awakening, the moment when you stop running and finally turn inward. We're diving deep into one of Carl Jung's most powerful truths. Life truly begins when you find yourself. But what does that really mean? Is it just about self-awareness? Or is it something far more demanding, far more transformational? Stay with me, because this isn't a motivational pep talk. It's a psychological mirror. And once you look into it, you might never see yourself the same way again. Carl Gustav Jung wasn't just another psychologist. He was a pioneer of the inner world, of the unconscious mind, the shadow, the mythic truths we carry in silence. Where others focused on helping people fit into society, Jung asked a different question. What if healing isn't about fitting in, but about becoming real? He believed that most people never truly find themselves, not because they're lazy or broken, but because the path to the true self is hidden, covered over by years of conditioning, roles, and expectations. From the moment we're born, we're told who to be. We're named, categorized, taught what's acceptable. We learn what gets praised and what gets punished. And over time, we start editing ourselves, hiding the parts that don't fit the script. Think about your own childhood. Were there moments you expressed something honest, only to be told it was too much? Were you ever scolded for being too sensitive? Or for dreaming too big? Or for getting angry? Little by little, you learn what not to show, what not to feel, what not to be. And in place of your truth, you build a mask. Jung called it the persona, the version of yourself crafted for the world to see. The persona is necessary. It helps us function in society, in relationships, in the workplace. But here's where the danger lies. The more we identify with the persona, the more we lose touch with the deeper self underneath it, the self that's still waiting to be seen. And then there's the other side, the part we don't show anyone. Jung called it the shadow. If the persona is your social mask, the shadow is everything you've hidden to keep that mask intact. It's the fears you push down, the desires you suppress, the parts of you that you were told were bad, wrong, or too much. But here's what makes this truly fascinating. The shadow doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It stays. And it doesn't sit quietly. It shows up in subtle ways, through anxiety, projection, self-sabotage. It leaks out when you're triggered, when you judge others harshly, when you can't explain why you're so reactive. You might dislike someone instantly and not know why. You might get deeply disturbed by traits in others, traits that, if you were honest, might exist in you too. Jung believed that those strong emotional reactions are often the shadow trying to speak, trying to show you the parts of yourself you've refused to acknowledge. But, and this is the turning point, what if the shadow isn't your enemy? What if it's the missing half of your truth? Jung's insight wasn't just psychological, it was spiritual. He believed that psychological growth doesn't happen by eliminating the shadow, but by integrating it, by facing the parts of yourself you've denied, by listening to the voice beneath your resistance, by reclaiming the very things you thought made you unlovable. Because inside your shadow are your suppressed strengths, not just your wounds. Your sensitivity, your creativity, your courage. All of these may have been pushed away because they didn't match what you thought was safe to be. But the more you suppress them, the more life feels hollow. Like something is always missing, even when things look fine on the outside. That's the silent crisis Jung saw in modern life. People living out roles, successful, busy, admired, but completely disconnected from who they really are. And so, they chase validation. They work harder, achieve more, seek constant approval. But beneath all that striving, there's a quiet unrest, a sense that they're not truly living, just performing. Sound familiar? Then here's the shift. Life doesn't begin when you reach success. Life begins when you find yourself. And finding yourself isn't about inventing a new identity. It's about uncovering the one you buried. So how do we do that? First, we have to realize that our identity, what we call me, might not be as solid as we think. The job, the personality, the culture, the history, all of that may be real, but it's not the whole. Jung believed that within every human being is a vast, inner world, filled with forgotten memories, unspoken truths, repressed emotion, and untapped potential. And the key to becoming whole is not found in fixing yourself, but in facing yourself. Have you ever felt a strange, haunting pull towards something greater? A quiet voice saying, "This isn't all there is. There's more of me I haven't found yet." That voice is your unconscious calling. That feeling isn't a fantasy, it's a signal. Jung called this process individuation. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about becoming someone real, someone whole. To do that, you have to go into the places you usually avoid, the beliefs you inherited but never questioned, the parts of you you've judged or disowned, the patterns you repeat without knowing why. Because true freedom begins the moment you stop running. And that's where we'll go next. We'll uncover why discomfort is often your greatest teacher, how distraction keeps you from your deeper self, and how facing the shadow transforms your life from the inside out. Most people never take this journey, but if you're still here, maybe you're not like most people. Let's go deeper. In part 1, we explored Jung's powerful idea that life doesn't truly begin until you find yourself, the real you, not the mask, not the role, not the version built for survival. But what Jung understood better than almost anyone is that this journey inward is not easy. Because before you find yourself, you'll probably lose yourself. And that's not a metaphor. It's a real lived experience, confusing, painful, even disorienting. It's what Jung called the confrontation with the shadow, the moment when everything you've repressed begins to surface. And what's the first thing most people do when that happens? They run, they numb, they distract, not because they're weak, but because no one taught them how to feel what's real. In a world that celebrates productivity over presence, appearance over authenticity, we've become masters at not feeling. We scroll, we binge, we busy ourselves. We chase dopamine and call it happiness. We chase validation and call it success. But the more we run from what's inside, the more disconnected we become from ourselves and from the people around us. Jung saw this clearly. He warned that modern life was built to keep us unconscious. And when we're unconscious, we don't question anything. We just follow the script, even when the script is killing us. So here's the first truth you need to face. Discomfort is not the enemy. Discomfort is the signal. It's the portal to growth. It's your unconscious trying to get your attention. Have you ever had a reaction that felt bigger than the moment? Someone makes a small comment, and it hits like a hammer. You get rejected, and suddenly you're drowning in shame. That's not just overreacting. That's the shadow speaking. That's a wound you buried long ago, now being triggered back into the light. Jung believed that these moments aren't random. They're invitations. And if you're brave enough to sit with them, not fix, not escape, just feel, you start to break the cycle. You begin to reclaim the parts of you that got exiled. Here's a powerful question Jung would want you to ask. What emotion do I avoid the most? Maybe it's sadness. Maybe it's anger. Maybe it's the fear of being alone. Whatever it is, that emotion is the gatekeeper to your inner world. And behind that gate is everything you've been looking for in the outer world. Peace, clarity, meaning, power. But it doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from meeting life fully as it is, even when it hurts. Let's talk about distraction. Because in Jung's time, distraction looked like noise, gossip, overwork. Today, it's even louder. It's social media, notifications, content overload, constant dopamine hits. It's a 24/7 performance where everyone is marketing their life and comparing it to yours. And slowly, without even realizing it, you lose track of who you are beneath the noise. But here's the thing. You can't find yourself if you never stop running from yourself. Silence is scary. Stillness feels threatening. Because in those quiet moments, the truth shows up. That's why so many people fear being alone. Not because they hate solitude, but because they're terrified of what might surface when there's nothing left to distract them. But Jung would say, that's exactly when the real work begins. The real you isn't found in achievement, or image, or status. It's found in presence, in depth, in radical self-honesty. So let's talk about what happens when you face the shadow. First, it doesn't destroy you. It grounds you. You realize that the parts of you were so afraid to feel, your jealousy, your shame, your fear, aren't evil. They're just parts of you that didn't get the love they needed. They were denied, dismissed, ignored. And now, they show up in destructive ways. Not because they're bad, but because they're desperate to be seen. Jung believed that every human being is capable of both great light and great darkness. And the goal of life isn't to eliminate one or the other. It's to integrate both. That's what makes you whole. That's where real power comes from. Not the ability to pretend you have it all together, but the courage to be honest when you don't. Here's something you've probably felt before but couldn't name. Sometimes the parts of yourself you hate the most are the parts with the most to offer. Your anger might be your buried sense of justice. Your anxiety could be unexpressed sensitivity and intuition. Your sadness could be your longing for connection and meaning. You weren't born broken. You were born whole. And then you were slowly taught to fragment yourself to survive. But now you're here. And if you're watching this far, something in you already knows. It's time to stop surviving and start integrating. So what does integration look like in real life? It's subtle, quiet, often messy. It means having hard conversations with others and with yourself. It means noticing when you're performing and choosing presence instead. It means being brave enough to sit with your triggers and ask what they're trying to teach you. Here are a few examples of integration in action. You feel jealous of someone's success. Instead of shaming yourself, you explore what desire or potential in you is being ignored. You notice you keep attracting the same toxic dynamics. Instead of blaming others, you examine what part of you still believes that's what you deserve. You feel the urge to numb out with distractions. Instead of escaping, you pause and ask, what pain am I avoiding right now? This is what Jung meant when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Integration is the act of reclaiming your agency, of becoming the author of your own story, instead of just reading lines handed to you by the past. But let's be honest, this work is hard. There's no shortcut, no instant breakthrough. Number 5-step plan to awakening. It's a lifelong process of remembering, releasing, rewriting. But here's the miracle. The more of yourself you reclaim, the more alive you feel. Not just emotionally, but spiritually. You stop needing the world to validate your worth. You stop outsourcing your power to other people. You stop chasing and start becoming. And slowly, almost without trying, life begins to feel different. You start noticing beauty in the smallest moments. You start feeling more grounded, even in chaos. You start showing up with a depth that others can feel, even if they can't explain it. Because you've stopped performing. You've started living. We're going to explore the mythic nature of the self. Why Jung believed symbols and dreams are the keys to awakening. And how to align with your deeper life path. Not the one handed to you, but the one you were meant to live. This next part is where things get mystical. But stay with me, because you're not just a personality. You're a soul in motion, and what you're becoming is already calling you forward. You've looked beneath the surface. You've faced the mask, the shadow, the suppressed parts of yourself. But now, something else starts to rise. Something deeper. Not just emotional or psychological, but mythic. Carl Jung believed the journey to the true self isn't just about fixing wounds. It's about waking up the soul and remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. This is where Jung goes beyond psychology and into something far older, the symbolic self. Let me explain. Jung saw that every culture throughout history told stories, myths, dreams, symbols that weren't just fantasy. They were maps of human transformation. Think of the hero's journey. The wanderer who leaves home, faces trials, encounters darkness, and returns changed. That story lives in nearly every ancient tradition, from Greek mythology to indigenous storytelling to modern films. But Jung said something bold. These myths aren't just stories we tell. They're stories that live inside us. In other words, you're not just reading the myth, you are the myth. And the deeper you go into yourself, the more those symbolic patterns begin to activate. You'll dream in metaphors. You'll be drawn to archetypes. You'll start seeing your struggles mirrored in ancient stories. Because the unconscious doesn't speak in words. It speaks in images. This is where Jung introduced one of his most powerful ideas, the archetypes. These are universal patterns of energy and experience that exist in all of us. The lover, the warrior, the caregiver, the magician, the shadow, the wise old man, the trickster, the orphan, the seeker. Each one holds a piece of who you are and who you're becoming. And as you evolve, you'll start embodying these roles in different ways. You might feel the lover when you finally open your heart, the seeker when you're lost but still searching, the warrior when you set boundaries, the magician when you create from nothing. These aren't fixed identities. They're energetic blueprints. And once you learn to recognize them in your life, things start to click. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And you start asking, what phase of the journey am I in? That changes everything. Let's pause for a second, because this may sound abstract, but it's actually incredibly practical. When you're struggling with confusion or fear or burnout, sometimes you don't need a strategy. You need a story to place yourself in. You need to remember that chaos doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're in the underworld part of the myth. It means the old is dying and the new is still being born. Jung believed that when we lose the thread of meaning in our lives, we begin to collapse, not just emotionally, but spiritually. We become cynical. We numb ourselves. We say things like nothing matters, but what we really mean is, I've lost the story of who I am. So here's the invitation. Stop trying to make your life look like someone else's version of success. Start asking, what story am I actually in right now? Am I in the exile, the initiation, the transformation, the return? Because once you name the phase, you can begin to move through it consciously. That's when life stops feeling random and starts feeling sacred. This brings us to one of Jung's most beautiful ideas, the self. Now, when we say self, we usually mean identity, your name, your habits, your beliefs. But for Jung, the self was something much deeper, something eternal, something sacred. He described the self as the whole of who you are, both conscious and unconscious, both light and shadow. It's not a thing you become. It's something you remember, something that's always been within you, waiting to be uncovered. You don't find the self by achieving more. You find it by removing what you're not. The roles, the masks, the fear, the false selves. And eventually, when the noise quiets and the dust settles, you meet something that feels ancient and familiar. That's the self, the part of you that watches, that knows, that has always been. And when you connect with it, life changes. Not because everything becomes perfect, but because you stop needing perfection to feel whole. Here's where dreams come in. Jung paid deep attention to dreams, not as random images, but as messages from the unconscious. He believed that when we sleep, the deeper self tries to speak, not in direct language, but in metaphor, symbol, mood. So when you dream of water, or falling, or animals, or losing teeth, it's not nonsense. It's the inner world trying to show you something the waking mind can't fully grasp. Learning to interpret your dreams isn't just spiritual, it's practical. It helps you track what's stirring beneath the surface. Because sometimes your soul will tell the truth in a dream, long before your mind is ready to accept it. Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." Let that sink in. The more you chase the external world, status, validation, image, the more you stay asleep. But when you turn inward, when you really look, you begin to awaken. You start to recognize the voice of the self. It's quieter than fear, more grounded than ambition. It doesn't beg. It doesn't scream. It whispers. And when you follow that voice, even if it doesn't make logical sense, you find yourself stepping into something sacred. Not a career, not a persona, not a brand, but a path. So let's bring it back. You're not just a personality. You're not just your wounds. You're not your trauma, your productivity, or your resume. You are a symbolic, evolving being on a mythic path that only you can walk. And the more you embrace that truth, the more life begins to respond. You meet people who feel like old friends. You feel drawn to places that feel like home. You create things you never thought possible. You become less afraid of losing because you're no longer chasing what was never truly yours. And you realize that the pain you've carried was always the price of awakening. In Part 4, we'll explore how to continue living from your true self, how to balance the demands of the world with your inner life, and what it really means to live a life of meaning, purpose, and integration in a modern age. This is the part where we leave the theory behind and ground it into real life. Because it's not enough to know who you are. You have to live it. And that is where your true life begins. So here we are. We've traveled through Jung's most powerful ideas, the persona, the shadow, the archetypes, the self. We've looked at the unconscious not as an enemy, but as a forgotten ally. We've explored how true life doesn't begin when you achieve more or gain status or collect applause, but when you finally come home to yourself. But here's the question everyone asks next. How do I actually live from this place? Because it's one thing to feel clarity in a moment of insight, but how do you carry that into your relationships, your work, your day-to-day choices? That's the challenge Jung left us with, not just to awaken, but to integrate. Because finding yourself is not a one-time event. It's a daily practice. Let's start with something simple and radical. You don't need to be someone else. That's the lie you were sold. You were told to model success, mimic confidence, become better. But what if your path isn't about adding more, but about stripping away everything that isn't you? Jung believed that most people live from the outside in. They shape their identity based on what others expect, then wonder why they feel lost. But when you live from the inside out, everything shifts. You start asking, what actually matters to me? What feels alive in my body, not just impressive on paper? What parts of myself have I been editing out just to fit in? These questions are uncomfortable, but they're real. And the more real you become, the less room there is for performance. Now, here's the next truth. Not everyone will understand the real you. And that's okay. When you start showing up without the mask, when you speak honestly, move differently, protect your peace, you will lose people. People who liked the version of you that played small. People who felt safe around your silence. People who projected their needs onto your persona. But what you lose in comfort, you gain in depth. You start meeting people who see you, not because you're performing, but because you're present. You build relationships that don't require shrinking. You attract opportunities aligned with your values. You feel less afraid of rejection because you're no longer rejecting yourself. That's what Jung meant by individuation, becoming who you were always meant to be, even if it costs you who you were taught to be. So let's talk about the practical part. What does living from your true self actually look like, day to day? It's not dramatic. It's subtle. It's quiet. It's consistent. Here are a few ways it might show up. You pause before saying yes to check if your body says no. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You create art, or write, or speak, not for likes, but because something in you has to express. You stop chasing healing like a project, and instead learn to sit with what's here as it is. Living from yourself means making space for silence, for rest, for the mystery. It means letting go of certainty and embracing curiosity. And most importantly, it means being honest with yourself, even when it's hard. Because the real you doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be true. Here's something Jung would want you to remember. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who you should be, not who you were told to be, but who you already are underneath it all. And that process isn't linear. It's not always graceful. There will be relapses into old patterns. Moments when the persona feels safer than the truth. Times when the shadow creeps back in with louder voices. But that's not failure. That's the path. Because the self isn't a destination. It's a relationship. One you return to. One you deepen. One you live from one step at a time. So if you're here listening to this and feeling like you're still lost, like you haven't found yourself yet, know this. You're already on the path. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're not late. You're waking up. And the very fact that you're asking deeper questions is proof that you're evolving. Jung said that every person has an inner voice, a quiet guide, but most people never hear it because they're too busy trying to be what the world expects. So your job is simple but sacred. Make space to listen. Start your mornings with silence instead of a screen. Journal without trying to fix anything. Follow the pull toward what feels honest, even if it doesn't make sense yet. And little by little, your real life will begin to take shape. A life built on truth, not fear. A life with roots, not just branches. A life that feels like home. Let's bring it all together. Carl Jung didn't offer hacks. He didn't give shortcuts or formulas. What he offered was something far more powerful. A way back to yourself. A map for those brave enough to go inward. A language for what most people feel but never name. A mirror for the soul. And his message was clear. You are not your persona. You're not your trauma. You're not the mask, the pain, the role, or the wound. You're something vast. And life truly begins the moment you stop running and turn to face the mystery of who you are. Not to solve it, not to control it, but to live it with awe, with honesty, with depth. Thank you for watching. If this resonated, take a breath and let it land. And maybe share this with someone you trust. Someone who's also waking up. Someone who's tired of the performance and ready for something real. Leave a comment below. What part of yourself are you reclaiming right now? What would your life look like if you stopped pretending? Because that's where the work begins. Not in becoming someone else, but in remembering who you already are. Until next time, stay inward, stay honest, and remember, life begins when you stop searching and start returning.